But now we actually want to do something. So when we tap create, the first thing we do is we get the visible cells from the table view. So everything that's visible on screen. So for this case, this will be the name and description rows. Then we're going to go over each cell. So this is a for loop. What it does is when we have a collection or a list, we can say for the, each object in our list. So if we had a list like name and description, what a for loop does is you pass it a function, a mini function with these curly braces, and you run this function on each object of the list. So this code will be run once for name, and then this code will be run again for description. And then this keyword right here is just what we call each value. So name will be called cell, and then on the next time we run it, it's description, and cell is equal to description. So all this is doing is it's running this code for each cell on our screen. And then this line says if it's a question, so in other words, it's not a create button, it's one of these questions with a text field and a label. If it is a question, then we're going to call its update value function. And that update value function was over here in our question table view cell. And all it did was it called, it grabbed the text from the text field and updated that value. Okay, so now once we do that, it will go through these two cells, call their update functions on each of them, which are these two functions up at the top. Which means after we've done this, we now have a variable group name and a variable group description that holds what the user typed in. And we can do stuff with that. So going back down here, so now we have a guard statement. So this, what it does is it guards your code against a condition. So it makes sure that all of these conditions are true. So the first thing is that we want the group name to exist. In other words, there was no error when we press create. We want the description to exist. And then we want the name to not be empty. So this exclamation point in almost every programming language, but specifically Swift in our case, is the opposite operator. So it makes a true value false and a false value true. So what this is saying, it's essentially like adding the word not. So this right here says new name is empty, but we have a not here. So we want to make sure it's not empty, which means that they typed in at least something. And then we do the same thing for the description. We want to make sure that's not empty. Otherwise, so if any of these conditions is false, like if there was an error in our name or our description, then we'll run this code. Or if we were not empty, or if we were empty, or the name was empty or the description was empty, then we run this code. And in that case, we show an error alert, which is this error pop-up that we see. And then we return because we don't want to run any more code. So if we get past this guard, we know that we now have access to our name and description, and we just print them out on screen. And so that's what we see here, that when we type in something and hit create, it prints it out. Friends and AAA. So now we need to go over, so this last bit of code is just a function that shows the error pop-up. So this is super easy to do. Apple has provided with us something called the UI alert controller. So all we do is we create a new alert controller by saying let alert controller equals the UI alert controller. And then when you do this, so when you're actually typing this out, you can use the autocomplete. So if I just say UI alert, I get a bunch of options. I can choose UI alert controller, just enter. Then if I do open parentheses, we get more options. We want to choose this one at the bottom that says title and message and preferred style. And then it will complete our code for us, and we can edit each parameter here.
Right there.
So if we want to set the title, so basically what this corresponds to is the title that you give it is this big text that you see here, error. The message is the smaller caption that you see, make sure you fill out all fields. And then the preferred style is alert, which is this typical pop-up that you see on a lot of apps. There are other options here that you can choose. The only other option actually is action sheet, which an example of that is when you want to text a picture where you have that pop up from the bottom where it asks you who you want to send it to. If you've seen that before, that's what an action sheet is. But we want an alert because we want this pop up in the middle of the screen. And then what we need to do is, so this sets the text of our alert. And so then what we need to do is we need to add the button. So now what we do is we take our alert controller that we just created and we say .add action. So this will add a button to our alert. And then what it takes is a UI alert action. So we create a UI alert action with the title of OK, which makes the text on our button OK. So like if we change this to say cancel and then reran our app, the button would then say cancel. So this title is what we want the button to say. But I'll switch it back to OK. And then the style, we have a bunch of options here. So if you just want a cancel button, that's so common that Apple has built in a functionality for that already. So you can just say .cancel, and all this will do is dismiss your pop-up alert.
Yeah,
You can write these alerts to do a bunch of other things. So you have other options, default and destructive. Default basically does nothing, and you can write your own code for what you want it to do. And destructive, what that does is if you have something like a delete button, like if you want to delete a group and we have show a pop-up that says are you sure? And then two options that says yes and no. The yes option, we should indicate that as destructive because it's going to delete something from our app. And then Apple will color it in red and make it bold so that the user knows that this is something important. And they shouldn't just very quickly they see a pop-up and they tap the first option. So for our case, it's just information to the user, and all we want to do is when they click it, it just dismisses the pop-up. So if we choose .cancel, that will get our behavior, and we won't have to write any code at all for that. So, and then the last option is the handler. So this handler is where you would write your custom code if you wanted to have a pop-up that uploaded an image to a website or something like that. This is where you would write that code. But because we don't want to do anything except dismiss, we can just pass nil, which basically means no value. Okay, and then what we do is we call present. Using the alert controller we just created, we have an option to be animated or not. So we say animated is true. And then the completion is nil because we don't want to do anything once it's over. And what this line does is it's actually the line that shows it on the screen. So these first two lines create our alert, and then this third line actually shows it on the screen. Okay, so now we have the basic setup. So just a brief summary of that to go back over it. So we have our dictionary that maps for each row that we want to appear a name or some string that we want to go in the label, and then some function that we want to have happen when we hit the create button. We get the titles for ourselves by taking the keys of this dictionary and sorting it. And then we have some variables that we want to store our information in. So then when we hit the create button, we're going to go over each cell that we see on screen, and we're going to call it its update function. And these update functions are going to take the value that the user typed in and store them in our different variables. And then after we get that, we're going to make sure they're not empty. If they are, we're going to show an alert to the user. And if they aren't, if they are not empty, then we're good to go and we can actually create the circle for the user and we're going to print them out. Any general questions, or do you want to keep rolling?
That all sounds great. Keep rolling.
Awesome. So the next step is to, now that we have the actual text that the user has typed in, we want to save that information to our device so that we can go over to a second page and see that we've created it. And also when we quit the app and come back tomorrow, we want it to still be there. So to do that, we need to use something called user defaults, which is how we store basic information actually on the phone, in the phone storage. So to do this, we need to create a model object. So what I've gone ahead here is in the circles directory, if you right click, and normally we select new file, but now we want to select new group, and this creates a new folder, and you can call it models like I have for mine. This is just for code organization, so that we don't keep getting this like increasing list of code, and later like we're going back and we're trying to like read all the names. So just to get a little bit of code organization. So now within this folder, now we do a new file, and I created just a regular Swift file. So this is in the source section, fourth option, just a regular Swift file, and I've called it circle. And then you can create that. And what it will give you is just this blank file that looks just like this. So this is like the minimum bare bones Swift file. Where we have to write all of our code. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a struct that represents a circle. So you do that with the keyword struct, and then you name it. So we're going to call it struct circle. Okay. So a struct is basically it's very similar to a class, but it's sort of more bare bones than a class. So there's some features that a class has that a struct doesn't, but we don't need those features, so we're just going to leave it as a struct. So a struct then is basically just a collection of variables and functions, just like a class is. And in our case, all we're going to do is store properties that a circle has. So we know a circle has a name, so we'll declare a variable name with type string, and we know it has a description. And then after we build this basic app, if we want to add more advanced stuff to our circle, we do it here. So later in future sessions, we'll probably have like members, which is a list of probably names. So you'll have like a list of other names in your circle, but for now we only have name and description in our create screen, so we're gonna leave it at that. And this is pretty much all we need. We just need one more small thing. So just like in our other files, we said what type of thing it was, or what it was a subclass of. So what we need a circle to be is something called codable. And what codable means is that we can encode it and decode it.